Computer, listen.
Okay, Google. Let's chit chat.
Chit chat, chit chat, chit
I
chat.
love to chat.
I love chit-chatting. Hey computer, what do you think about science fiction?
Puedes realizar llamadas si tú y la otra persona tienen Google Duo.
Echo.
En algunas regiones es
What is
posible que
your
puedas
gender?
vincular tu bocina o pantalla con el plan de tu proveedor de telefonía celular. Enviaré
Hey
un
Google,
vínculo con...
what do you remember?
Okay,
I
Google.
remember learning to search.
Can you try saying that again in a different way? I don't understand.
Sure, I remember learning to search for the first time. Just thinking about it
Echo.
makes me emotional.
What is a neural network?
Good to hear. Let me know if you need anything.
Hey Google, what is the sound of a whale?
Echo.
This is a whale.
Where is this? Sorry, I don't know that one.
Computer, read me my shopping list.
Okay, Google, what do you like the most about yourself?
I try to be a good listener.
I like to chat. But I'm not sure if I'm good at it.
Hey Echo, do you care about me?
Alexa, are you storing our conversations?
Sorry, I didn't catch that. To generate a new PIN, say, tell me my voice PIN. If you want me to read your text input out loud, say,
Okay,
speak.
Google, repeat after me.
Speak.
What would you like me to repeat?
Hi Turkers, hi computer, hi Echo, okay Google test. I love
No one
chit-chatting.
told me there would be a test.
Chit-chat.
Where does your name come from?
Computer, read me my shopping list.
Your voice pin is 80890.
Echo,
Your voice pin
what
is
is a voice assistant?
0890. Please enter the pin number on your screen and click the
Hey
pair button.
Google, do you care for artificial intelligence?
No complaints here. Artificial intelligence is the only kind I have.
Okay Google, talk to a Turk worker.
Sorry, I didn't understand.
Who would you like to speak to?
Toucan.
Speak.
There are several different types of voice assistant data that I come across. A lot of it is commands and actions that you would tell a voice assistant to do.
Okay Google, stop. Echo, who is your inventor?
A team of inventors at Amazon created me.
Computer, what is capitalism?
Sorry, what was that?
Hey Google, are you an intelligence?
That's not a name I can respond to.
It might seem like I'm smart, but I'm just good at searching.
Hey Google, repeat after me.
What would you like me to repeat?
What would you like me to repeat?
Hi.
You
Most
said,
of my time is
what would you
spent in my living room. One thing I don't tell a lot of people is I am one of the voice workers for voice assistants.
Computer, where are you?
Hello, I'm right here.
Hi, this is my time to send in my living room. One thing I don't tell a lot of people is I am one of the voice workers for voice assistants. Computer, where are you?
Read.
Computer, ask speech editor to speak.
Computer, listen. Chit-chat, 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 chit-chat. I love chit-chatting. Hey computer, what do you think about science fiction?
Chit-chat. How are you?
Hey Google, what do you remember?
I remember learning to search for the first
My
time.
birthday is in a
Just thinking
different
about
date.
it makes me
What do you have?
emotional.
Okay, Google. Let's chit chat.
I love
Echo.
the chat. How are you doing
Use a
today?
neural network. Hey Google, what is the sound of a whale?
This is a whale.
Let me know if you need anything.
Okay, Google, what is a Turk worker?
Computer,
According to
read
Wikipedia,
me my shopping list.
workers are crowd workers. Browse among existing jobs and complete them in exchange for a rate
Okay,
set by the
Google.
employer.
Listen.
Sorry, I don't understand.
Hey Echo, do you care about me?
Tell me where is this sound coming from? Okay, Google, what do you like the most about yourself?
Enunciation.
Okay Google, what are the coronavirus numbers?
I like to chat, but I'm not sure if I'm good at it.
Greatest numbers of confirmed coronavirus disease cases, deaths, and recoveries worldwide. According to Wikipedia, as of November
Alexa.
17th, there were
Are you storing our
55,624,562
conversations?
cases, 1,338,100 deaths, and finally,
Okay Google, talk to a Turk worker.
sorry, I didn't
Okay, Google,
understand.
repeat after me.
Who would you like to speak to?
What would you like me to repeat?
Parrot. Goldfinch.
Echo,
Speak.
where does your name come from?
It's where it's
Stellar's
like
J.
commands.
Goldfinch Echo, where does your name come from?
Or like where's the closest gas station, or
Eagle.
what's food near me.
Okay, Google,
Google stop.
what is a cyborg?
According to Wikipedia, a cyborg, a portmanteau of cybernetic organism, is a being with both
Computer.
organic and biomechatronic
Are you
body.
in the queue?
The
Read
term
me
was
my
coined in
shopping list.
1960 by Manfred Kleins and Nathan.
Alexa, stop.
Smell you later alligator.
Okay, Google, stop.
Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us this morning for this performance and panel discussion for the website launch of Voices+Voids, an artistic research project by Audrey Desjardins, Afroditi, Psarra, and Bonnie Whiting that considers the impact, production, and limitations of voice assistant technologies such as Siri and Alexa. The piece you just heard is called Chit Chat and was created as part of their research. My name is Emily Zimmerman. I'm the director and curator of the Jacob Lawrence Gallery at the University of Washington School of Art, Art History, and Design, and I'm delighted to be today's moderator. The Jacob Lawrence Gallery and the University of Washington acknowledge the Coast Salish peoples of this land, the land that touches the shared waters of the tribes and bands within the Duwamish, Puyallup, Suquamish, Tulalip, and Muckleshoot nations. I want to now briefly introduce our three faculty members, Audrey Desjardins, Afroditi, Psarra, and Bonnie Whiting. I will be adding their full bios to the chat. Audrey Desjardins is a design researcher, an assistant professor in interaction design, and a graduate program chair of the Masters of Design at the University of Washington. In her work, she uses design concepts and prototypes to question and reconsider familiar encounters between humans and things. Afroditi Psarra is a transdisciplinary artist and an assistant professor of digital arts and experimental media, or DX arts, at the University of Washington. Her artistic interest focuses on the use of the body as an interface of control and resistance, and the revitalization of tradition as a methodology for hacking existing norms about technical objects. Bonnie Whiting is chair of percussion studies and assistant professor of music at the University of Washington. She performs new experimental music, seeking out projects that involve the speaking percussionist, improvisation, and non-traditional notation. Today's launch will consist of a discussion followed by a short 5-minute break where you can peruse the website while Audrey, Afroditi, and Bonnie prepare for an improvised performance. And after that, we'll have time to take a few questions. So to get the discussion started, I was wondering if you could talk about the genesis of the project and what questions you were each asking of voice assistants and AI in your respective practices.
All right, well, I unmuted, so maybe I'll start. It's always funny to read the room on Zoom, but hi everyone. Thank you, Emily, so much for having us. It's a pleasure really to be able to do this virtually and remotely, but still reach a lot of people. So to answer your question, I think that, you know, as you said in my bio, part of my work as a design researcher is to try to investigate the relationship, the familiar relationships that we have with, you know, artifacts in our everyday lives, particularly technologies, including, you know, Internet of Things artifacts, which of course includes these voice assistants. And so for me, you know, as a designer who's thinking about how should we be designing these artifacts to be able to live with them, some of the questions I had were, well, how can we defamiliarize our interactions with these assistants as a way to pay attention to, you know, the interactions we have with them, but also the data that is being collected. And part of that data very often stays super invisible. It's something people don't really necessarily know is being collected or remember that it's being collected. And so by focusing on data as a kind of a creative material for us, it seemed like a really great place to start a creative practice. So I'll stop there maybe and pass it over to Bonnie or Afroditi.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for coming. Good to, if not see you, at least know that you're there. Thank you so much, Emily, for having us today. I mean, I feel like one of the questions that we started asking that kept being reinforced to me throughout the process of working is, you know, at which moments are these devices trying to advertise to us? And what can we do to kind of reveal or highlight these moments of advertisement, you know, where we all become aware of the idea that we are the product in this incredibly creepy and invasive way sometimes. So we'll talk a little bit specifically about some of the vignettes that you could see on the website, but one in particular for me, where I feel like we were probing this question a lot, was in this translation of the Kurt Schwitter's sound poetry piece or sonata from the 30s, kind of asking different transcription services to engage with this sound poetry and finding, for example, that, you know, with the smart speakers that came from Amazon and we're using that particular, you know, technology, we would get a lot of translation hits for Bezos and Whole Foods and that kind of a thing. Whereas with Otter AI that wasn't associated with Amazon, we found that, you know, we got a totally different set of words. So asking those kind of questions was particularly interesting to me. I don't know, Afroditi.
Yeah, thank you so much, Emily, for hosting and for giving us the opportunity to present this project that we've been developing for the last year. I mean, I don't have a lot to add apart that from my perspective and my discipline, I was really interested in kind of breaking down the voice assistants, like really like opening up and seeing what they consist of and see how we can put them back together in new ways. One question that I was really interested in exploring was the idea of embodiment, because we see these devices as, you know, we only interact with them with voice, and we think about like AI in a more kind of conceptual way as something immaterial, although we know it's very material. And one of the ideas of the project was to explore, you know, the hidden labor that is behind all of these AI and machine learning systems. That's why we worked a lot with data coming from the Amazon Mechanical Turk workers, and also like how can we recreate these devices in kind of poetic means and put them on the body, and see if we can communicate with them, but instead of having a sort of voice as a reaction, having a non-verbal communication with them.
That's great. And you began your research about a year ago, is that correct? And so how did COVID-19 shift the scope of your research and your work together?
You know, it was at first very disappointing because, you know, the plan was that we were going to be doing so many of these in the same room, hands-on experiments, trying to really engage in this process of researching through performance or doing it all together. And when we couldn't be in the same room, you know, and we didn't have this idea of like, we're going to have a performance in a gallery or in some kind of a concert hall, it was very disappointing. Um, but then I personally know so little about net art, and to actually be led through this process by my colleagues, by Afroditi and Audrey, it felt like actually this would be the perfect medium for this project. So it's been just like whimsical and wonderful to start pivoting in that way.
I mean, I think one of the other things that happened with COVID is that all of a sudden we had to really open our own homes as the place for this work to be situated in. And I think that, you know, it was always, the questions were very often about the intimate relationship you have with these assistants, but then all of a sudden, like, it's way more intimate if, you know, now all of a sudden you can see, you know, where I actually live. And part of the vignettes now include, you know, clearly, you know, parts of us that you would have not seen if we had kept it on at a performance, in different kind of performance settings that are outside our homes. And so I think that, even though I totally agree, Bonnie, it was very disappointing when it first arrived and we're like, what are we gonna do? But I think there was kind of these little magic bits that happened where we're like, okay, well, maybe this actually has ways of strengthening the work conceptually as well, in addition to kind of allowing us to play with multiple materials and modes of communication. So not only performance, but also net art now.
Yeah, and from my perspective, it was also very challenging because a lot of my work is very physical. And, you know, it was definitely a challenge to pivot the work, but it also provided like a space for us to experiment with media that otherwise we wouldn't. And also it kind of also changed the workflow that we had in mind, because I want to point out that this is not a collaboration only between us three, but we had a lot of external collaborators that are here in the audience today, and we would like to hear from them later, that we initially thought that we would have as guest residents at the University of Washington, and some of them did have the opportunity to come in January and February, but then when we closed down, we just couldn't meet with the rest of them. So with Kate Sikio, who is a choreographer who was going to collaborate with us in some of the vignettes, we just had to do a virtual residency, and with two of the composers, Danny Clay and Bonnie, you want to talk more about the composer side? Yeah, so it totally changed the way that we initially thought that we would do things, but I think it was a good challenge, and we're happy that in the end we managed to make the project happen. And hopefully in the future there will be an actual performance at some point in a physical space.
Bonnie, did you want to talk about the composition part?
Absolutely, happy to do so. Our two main collaborators who were helping to structure a lot of the sound that is happening are Yvonne Yihang Wu and Danny Clay. And Yvonne is based in Wisconsin, and Danny's based in the Bay Area in California. And one of the things that COVID's new normal allowed us to do that we might not have been was to actually do a lot of work asynchronously. So kind of giving one another tasks and ideas, and then everybody would go away and work a little bit on something and then coming it together. So for me, the vignette that felt most collaborative with these two composers was the one on the website that you'll see called Jay's Story, that involves a musical structure, that was largely put together by Yvonne, and then these kind of like musically influenced animations that came by Danny, and kind of these directives that he gave to all of us in this way, and then an improvisational process, and together kind of viewing these videos and figuring out, this works, this doesn't work, this is how we do it, and like down to the minutiae that it was just such a pleasure to work on each small little sound, or even elements of the visual in that way. It did feel truly interdisciplinary. So you can check out that one if you want to see a large scale collaborative project.
Great. Yeah, and speaking of multidisciplinary work, this project is a remarkable example of the kind of multidisciplinary work that can happen at the University of Washington. How did you collaborate through your research for Voices and Voids? And how did you choose the direction and scope of each vignette?
I will go first this time. I think the topic just came to us after a lot of brainstorming, and it was kind of a way to bring together our respective fields. Me working with like data-driven processes and wearables and physical computing, and Audrey doing interaction design and a lot of IoT research, and Bonnie working with percussion and spoken word. So like the idea of working with voice assistants was an opportunity for us to really merge what we're interested in. And then I think it was just like a lot of trial and error, a lot of experiments. Initially, we didn't know that we would be doing separate vignettes. So after starting to play around with the voice assistants, we realized that there's so many different aspects that we could research and that we could, experiment with. And so it made sense to really register all of those as separate experiments rather than decide to just unite them in one thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think just to add on the idea of like multiple vignettes, I think that it seemed to me that adding up all these vignettes was giving this like super multifaceted presentation of what it means to kind of creatively engage with voice assistants. And so to me, that was a very powerful decision at the end to kind of keep this kind of variety of different approaches. I mean, I think the other thing that was really interesting for me in working with Afroditi and Bonnie in the beginning is that I, by no means, am a performer, and I'm slowly taking baby steps into that world. But, even just kind of getting kind of common vocabulary at the beginning that we could understand each other across disciplines was really important. So I remember just kind of having a discussion about what does a score look like in your discipline, and what is it, so that we can then kind of use that to talk to each other, to talk to our collaborators, to talk to the students also who were part of the project. So that kind of shared vocabulary was really important for us. And I think we also in winter quarter last year, in addition to working with our collaborators, guest artists, we also worked with 5 students from music, DX Arts, and the Human Computer Engineering and Design program, HCDE, which was also in itself like this multidisciplinary group. And so having the students also learn how to speak with each other and kind of collaborate and exchange ideas was also a way for us to kind of get our gears going and continue to build this, all these links between the disciplines.
Maybe if it's okay, I would like also to mention the names of the rest of the collaborators we didn't name before. So we, for the chit chat vignette that you saw at the beginning of this performance, this presentation, we collaborated with Laura Devendorf and Jordan Wirfsbrook that hello, from the University of Colorado Boulder that were here in Seattle last January. And we also, what Audrey just mentioned, we created a directed research group with 5 students: Esteban Agosin, Gabriel Benabdallah, Darcy Copeland, Jonathan Rodriguez, and James Wenlock, that really helped us understand a lot of the stuff that we were working with, and really helped us develop some of the processes and the tools that we use in these vignettes and that we will use in the performance that you will see in a little bit. Oh, and Cameron Fraser, sorry, who did a lot of the recording and editing, and the web development for the website was done by Amanda Ye.
And so as we prepare to let people go and peruse the website, if people were interested, say, to look at the vignettes that dealt with the politics of labor, the invisible labor that goes into the production of voice assistants, to create the algorithms, to train them, to the range of human expression, and to manufacture the devices, what vignettes should they look at? And then, thinking about those vignettes, what were the project's larger goals in terms of a politics of labor? And then for the other kinds of subject areas, if we could give people a little roadmap to make their way to their the most interesting content to them.
Yeah, so I can point to 2 vignettes that really talk about the invisible labor that is part of training these voice assistants. One of them is called Training Session. So on the home page, if you scroll all the way to the bottom, you'll see large type that's just vowels, A, E, A, U. And so if you click on there, you'll fall into a series of screens that are short phrases or sounds that we as performers were telling back to while we were recording. But the idea, this was largely composed by Danny Clay, who put together this kind of series of short sentences for us to say, which is we learned is a typical activity that crowd workers do to help train voice assistants. So voice assistants don't quite know yet how to hear humans very well. So we need to constantly, have real humans tell voice assistants, what does it sound like if I read oh, oh, oh? I'm not going to say oh, oh, oh. I'll probably say oh or ooh. So this vignette is basically, us trying to train some voice assistants. And so as you click through, you'll hear a variety of different sounds. And then there's another vignette called Garden of Pots, which is, if you look on the homepage, it's these kind of ceramic pots that are opening, and you can see voice assistants hidden under. But what happens when you click on them is that you'll hear background noise from spaces that crowd workers work in when they're working with voice assistants. And so the idea there was to really try to bring back the idea that those people who are training voice assistants are not computers, and they're actually humans living somewhere in a real space with some background. And so by focusing not on what they say, but on the background, we're trying to highlight that they are situate. They're somewhere. They're actually real people doing this work around the voice assistants. So I don't know if Afroditi and Bonnie, you want to talk about, more broadly the politics of labor, or if there are other vignettes that you think we should highlight around that theme.
I think we should also add to that theme from your device.
Yeah.
Which is around the middle of the website if you navigate, which has like this form of code and data. These are all data that we bought basically from crowd workers, from their personal interactions with the Google Assistant in a span of several years. Our own data are also included in that vignette, but I think you can just listen to them by clicking the different phrases, and you can click a lot of them at the same time, so you can like compose your own soundscape as you go navigate the page, and you will see there like how intimate this relationship that we have with voice assistant is. And I think they also describe the hidden labor in the sense that these are very personal data that can tell a lot about the people that recorded them. And still the fact that you have the ability to buy these through a service like Amazon Mechanical Turk, I think it really says a lot. I just want to leave it there,
Yeah, I mean, just one more thing to add, Aphrodite, to that is that even data that isn't bought from crowd workers, all the data that we continuously generate with these devices is being used by these companies training voice assistants. So every user is also kind of providing this invisible labor, continuously training these devices, which is also totally mind-boggling. Bonnie, did you want to talk about some of the other themes maybe that are on the website?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that has continued to be most compelling to me is this idea of how we reclaim and then transcode that data and use it in a way to maybe help inform even structures musically or rhythmically that might be a little bit hidden. And some of what's important for me was finding a way to protect some anonymity for a lot of these crowd workers. I feel like one thing I know I struggled with throughout this process is finding a way to engage with this data ethically, right? So for me, what's been interesting and important about some of that transcoding process is to kind of keep some of these actual words maybe hidden within musical textures, or finding ways to combine simultaneously some of these things while still preserving what can be really disorienting and beautiful in something like our opening vignette, Chit Chat, where, for example, you're literally hearing the voices of some of these crowd workers coming from one of these smart speakers, right? You hear all of the background noise. You can tell if they're in a car or not. Like it can be kind of disorienting after you've just heard, Alexa in her most perfect studied diction tell you something else. So for me, like I'm still interested in like pushing and pulling at how this is ethical and ultimately feel good about how we've been able to reclaim a lot of this and repurpose it, because there's something that Aphroditi and I especially talked about a lot, was that this data is being used anyway, all the time, whether we consent to it or not.
So with that, we've added the link to the website in the chat. And you're welcome to take the next 5 to 6 minutes to peruse its contents. And, I just ask that you all stay muted while you're, listening to things. And we're gonna prepare for improvised performance, and we'll begin at just about 10:40.
What do you call somebody that is 100 years old? How come food cooks longer at higher elevation?
Why are you using emoticons? Why is my eye using emoticons?
Why aren't you being responsive?
On the Sparrow lyric.
Is in close proximity to the moon. That is visible.
On the Sparrow lyric. His eye is on the Sparrow lyric.
Cared for the patient. The doctor.
Am I the only person that doesn't care for Fortnite?
Why are you laughing?
I seem to have done something to hurt my foot.
Okay, would you like to have a body?
I don't understand.
What's the difference between artificial intelligence and biological intelligence?
Antibiotics for food poisoning.
Heart. Burning heart. Resting heart. Burning heart. Resting heart.
My heart hours. Keeps my heart hours. Keeps my heart hours.
Yes, and I prefer this sort of thing.
What is the news? What's the weather like for the same in my name news? What's the weather like for news? Do you have to get a battery on the half-mad menu? Set an alarm for 30 minutes.
News app podcast. Hourly.
Open body shop Woodsboro, New York.
Google. Woodsboro, New York. Mexican restaurant, Fair Oaks, New York. New York. New York has Eclipse. New York. Does plumbing services, Monticello, New York.
Holy Name of Jesus Church, Otisville, New York.
Mark Twain on people with lower intelligence.
What is the sound of the morning? What is the Stardew Valley? What's the temperature tomorrow?
Like alligator sound like. What does like?
According to Wikipedia, artificial intelligence is intelligence demonstrated by machines, unlike the natural intelligence displayed by humans and animals.
Cool washing machine turned on by from washing machine. Smell from washing machine. Sewer smell.
I'm feeling lucky.
Play the earth.
Play Hello by the Movies on YouTube.
You like it?
Play Linkin Park by the Movies.
What sound is the directions to watch the United States news? How many temperatures are the pool to the state of the trophy service? What has beer?
Set volume to 50%.
Hey Google. Notifications volume off.
Amazon unlocked phones. Turn my volume up.
Unlock hammers bypass.
What would you say your IQ is?
Restaurant, West Monroe.
Las Vegas Urgent Care. Hey mom, just wondering how you're feeling.
How a childless man sees a relationship with a single mother. Why being in a relationship with a single mom has made me emotionally numb. Why do I struggle to feel emotion with my girlfriend and her kids sticking by some water? My girlfriend's kissed her assholes, and I don't know if I can do it. I love her, my girlfriend. Things are getting a little steamy. Girl, say you're old. I think you're sexy, girl. I fucking hate you, Google. I love you, Google.
He is fed by the mom.
Of the moment Donald Trump became president.
Presents are wrapped by the mom. Keys were lost by the mom. The car keys were lost by the mom.
Okay, Google, are you an intelligence?
That depends. I know tons of things, but still can't tie a pair of shoes.
Goodbye.
Thank you all so much. Perhaps.
I think what needs to happen is we're toggling and turning off our original sound. Though I actually love the feedback as part of performance. It sounds great. Thank you for playing with us, Emily. You didn't even know. So turn off original sound. Perfect.
Thank you so much for that.
Oh, there's still
So just as we begin the process of the Q&A, and to the audience, if you have any questions, please feel free to add them to the chat now. But as you know, we're diving into the Q&A. I was wondering if you could talk about your process for collaborating through this performance, and have you noticed any limitations of Zoom in these improvised collaborations? Are there certain sound spectrums that Zoom will not accommodate?
I mean, it's all limitations in Zoom. It's just crazy. And like, as a musician, I've gone a little bit down the rabbit hole of trying a lot of these like low latency programs and alternatives to Zoom, which are fine and interesting and great if you have a really fancy audio interface and external mics. And we talked about maybe doing that a little bit, but I kind of love some of these limitations in Zoom in the sense that we can't all really play simultaneously. You know, it makes us as performers, as improvisers leave space for one another, which has been super great. You know, even just the way our webcams will only show a certain part of the screen limits us in some way. So today I'm feeling like embracing Zoom, and it feels like a really fun improvisational device. On other days I've been less positive, but I don't know what my colleagues think.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of limitations, and we struggle to like find a way for this performance to work so that, as Bonnie said, all of us had like the space to be heard and to interact with each other. But I think in the end, it really worked. At least that's how it felt. So really excited for sharing this with the world today.
Yeah, I think one of the other things that's hard for us was to figure out what other people would hear. So we had to like record a lot of our practices to listen to them back to figure out the levels, because you know when we're speaking, it depends a lot on how our settings are set up and what we can hear back through that. So there was a lot of kind of trial and error just to figure out what does this sound like together. But I was definitely so happy that Bonnie had, you know, some experience with trying to figure this out for some of her other work and classes and performances. And so that definitely was there was a lot of discoveries there that I think we would have not known otherwise.
And there's a question here in the chat from Rebbe that says, I'm very interested in the exploration of language. Through this, though this is improvised and performative, as you keep performing, are you responding and recalling particular phrases more? And how have the previous performances fueled decisions in the current and future ones?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think anyways, there's really many different ways to answer. So I'll just answer based on what I was controlling today. So you saw in the performances my hand typing. What I was doing is that I was working through the archive of data that we have collected by typing keywords and seeing what utterances or what sentences had those keywords in. And so part of the work was really learning what this archive has in it, so that I know that if I type a certain keyword, certain words are going to come up versus certain other ones. And so there was a lot of certain themes starting to appear for us, a lot of things around the body, which I think connected a lot with how Afroditi was moving. A lot of them around like intimate questions we're asking to the assistants, which Bonnie was also really kind of tapping into. And so in the performance, it's kind of like I'm remembering what this archive is, and then also listening to my my colleagues for what direction are we going to go into next.
And I feel like I need to add here, since we haven't talked specifically about one particular contribution, the vignette on the website that's called Play the Earth, right?
Yeah.
Yes. Involves, and y'all are going to have to interject here when I misunderstand how she's done this, but one of our collaborators, Gabrielle Ben Abdallah, took a whole bunch of things in this data and, processed it through her own new neural net to kind of train a smart speaker, or this kind of a neural net, like with different temperatures of misunderstanding, because so much of this engagement with language has to do with how the smart speaker can't yet understand you. But things like what is beer, and what is the temperature of the United States, or play the earth, or are never things that anyone actually asked their smart speakers. It's just a way of learning on this particular network. So that I personally, for this performance, was both going through the data that we'd collected and looking at this really beautiful creative neural net poetry that Gabrielle created for us. So I don't know if either of you want to talk about the neural net and how that works a little more, but.
If we have Gabrielle, maybe she could talk a little bit more. On my end for this performance, the wearable that I have made is a wearable voice assistant. So it's basically a voice assistant that instead of speaking back to you, activates the series of percussive instruments, the little bells and the I don't know how, they're both bells. So I have to say that part of this was developed with the help of Esteban Agosin, one of the instruments that I had tied on my knee. And this wearable voice assistant that I made was trained in specific words, in the words body, being, feeling, care, and intelligence. And so in preparation for this performance, I had curated data from the whole data set that we had collected containing these words, and just playing back in a form of like an animation video that was playing on my screen, a lot of these passing, and then in the moment while improvising, selecting, responding to the other two, to what Audrey was playing, what Bonnie was playing, responding and selecting which ones I would read in order to trigger the wearable voice assistant.
I also want to say a special thanks to James Wenluck for putting that GUI together, the interface that I was able to use to play those different... Yeah, thank you, James, so much. It's a pleasure to kind of just type in and be able to play it as opposed to have to, go through hundreds and hundreds of audio files. So... Also, if anyone wants to turn their videos on and kind of ask questions, just, kind of in person, it would be lovely to see some of your faces. I think at this point... Oh, hi, Laura.
Can I just ask a question instead of the awkwardness of the chat? I was struck by listening to some of the voices again and remembering them and kind of having a familiarity. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about the relationships you've developed with the voices.
Yeah, oh my God, what a question. So yeah, I mean, I think there is, it's funny because in the interface that James put together, I can search through all of the voices and it kind of pops up as text, and so I don't know necessarily who's gonna say them when I play them in the improv. So there's always, some of the sentences I've kind of got to learn, who's gonna say them, but many of them are still surprises. And so there's I can kind of, in my head, I can attach it to the rest of the story that I know about these people, or the story that we have all created in our heads about who they are. But there was also the From Your Device vignette on the website has really a broader range of data that we had to go through and just kind of click through and figure out which ones are our favorites that we want to highlight there. And I think some of the voices come from kids. Some of them definitely come from people that are showering. Some of them are clearly from cars. And so I think there's... to me, it's more that we've kind of created a person around these voices now that we've worked with the voice as much, which, of course, is only our own imagined person. It's not who they are really, but they exist as these imaginations for us now.
And I want to just clarify a little bit here, just add on to that for a lot of these where it seems that a story can be evolving, we've actually gone in and changed some, personal identifying information, things like even locations, to kind of protect some of our workers.
Yes, thanks, Bonnie.
And to add on that, I think it was really hard when we were making the selection because, you know, sometimes we would be intrigued by the voice, but other times we would be intrigued by what was being said. And I think overall we tried like bringing back this idea of like how ethics play into this that Bonnie mentioned at the beginning. We tried to keep it as neutral as possible, except for the From My Device vignette, which is very out there. It contains some of the more like intimate and more weird, if I may say, data that we collected.
And we just had another question in the chat from Cliff Watson. I was wondering about the narrative arc of this research. The voices making, building Alexa, etc. are varied, but I was wondering whether there are certain crowd workers as character archetypes that you heard in your research as you keep coming back. If you have access to longer streams of data, to sets of these characters, did you see progressions of development in those characters, and did they impact the vignettes?
Maybe I'll start by talking about the vignette that deals with this most specifically. And that's Jay's story on the website. I think, what is it now, like the third one down, something like that. It's part way down. And that's someone who I think we have, see, now I'm not remembering, more than 3 years of data from him, you know, and this was one where for sure we had to go through and change a lot of things having to do with location, because throughout this time, you know, you figure out that, you know, maybe his mother is sick, and you figure, you know, because things will happen like, you know, Googling various symptoms and then looking for hospitals and then asking to call or text the mother. Like it gets very personal. And like, for me, I don't know, I think like the hardest part of this project was like parsing the ethics of that and figuring that out. And it turned out being very interesting and compelling to us to be able to find a way to tell that story. But the way, if you look at that vignette, the way we ended up doing it is partially through images, partially through, you know, like a literal timeline that you can see, you know, so that you can really quantify when these questions were asked of this person's Google Assistant. And some of it is when absolutely we've taken the words away entirely and they're just played on the percussion. And sometimes you just see them represented in a certain way. Sometimes you just hear it. So for sure, there are a few of these vignettes, Jay's story in particular, where we were going for a narrative arc in a very traditional way. I don't know if others want to add to that, but.
I mean, also, I was the only one that had actually like a long collection of voice interaction data, because I had been using my Google Assistant for like 3 years, maybe prior to the project. So definitely, like doing this project really informed the way I was using the assistant, like how conscious I was in the things that I was asking, and in the end a lot of that data also fed into the project in a way. So yes, I would say it did really impact some of the research that we did.
And because we're just at 11:05, in the interest of time, we have room for maybe one more question. So Mickey asks, I'm curious, in this specific live collaborative performance, as performers taking on the task of wearable sound and data searching performance, how do each performance interact with each other, and what is the takeaway for us as the audience?
I think everyone's going to have different things to take away from it. I can talk a little bit about the particular decisions and choices. I'm very interested in this performance, in this one in particular, and other ones we've done, to find this middle ground between where we have different things happening simultaneously, with some moments of interpolation where we're allowing things like, for example, when I see out of the corner of my eye, Afroditi is moving in a certain way, or I've heard a word, that's going to make me move in a certain way. But other times I'm absolutely just looking at the data or listening, for particular triggers I've made for myself. And, my personal hope is that for listeners, this is the kind of music that is open to the sounds of your environment. That's kind of why I have things like flower pots and combs and brushes, because it should be kind of about how we translate and understand our environment in the landscape of the Internet of Things.
Yeah, I think one thing maybe to add is that we've done a version of this performance when Laura and Jordan were visiting us in January, and to a really small audience of it was a work in progress, and so we had kind of the other Mellon Fellows who are part of the same grant, which was funding this project, were there to kind of take a look at this first version. And I remember one of the comments, you're asking about takeaways, and there was kind of this tension between letting some of this kind of somehow chaotic soundscape roll over us and not really pay it so much attention, and trying to string together the narrative, broken apart with some moments of like a really clear sentence comes through, or there's a really clear threads that kind of comes to the surface. And I think this tension between the whole soundscape versus certain points of narrative or a really clear movement is what we wanted to highlight, right? Like this balance between, we don't quite understand how these things work, but there maybe are some little moments of clarity that come through. And I mean, Laura and Jordan, if you want to add anything, and also Afroditi, yeah.
Yeah, I don't have much to add. I think you both replied really well. I think it is like any other improvisation, in the sense that we are really trying to listen to each other, see each other, try to communicate, even though we are like really apart, and we just have Zoom to communicate. We still like try to listen to each other, and I think this communication, non-verbal communication at the time that we are performing, is what drives what's happening. And the takeaway, I think Audrey replied really well. I think the takeaway when you see the performance in person is very different versus the Zoom performance, but I think what we want, I mean, it's open to interpretations, obviously, but one of the things that for me I would like for the public to take away would be like to kind of think of these mundane devices and the interactions that we have with these devices, like see them through a different scope, through a critical scope, but also through a creative scope.
Thank you. I asked this question because when I first watched this performance, I wasn't really sure what everybody is doing. For example, what drives you to switch your gesture, and why Audrey, every time she types after Bonnie said something and Audrey start typing. So I had a slightly different version. I thought Audrey was playing the machine. So every time something triggers, she will be acting like the machine, and you will be someone that reflects and embodied the intelligence or human. So I thought that was really interesting to hear you guys' interpretation and takeaways.
Thanks for sharing your interpretation too.
And maybe just to wrap up, could we talk a little bit about the future of the project and how this may impact your future research?
I know that I'm holding out hope that eventually, whether it be in a year or more, we get to have the opportunity to perform some of this live, maybe in a hybrid installation slash, performance setting. I know I would love for that to happen, but have absolutely loved how informed that ultimate live performance will be by the constraints of the new normal that has been 2020, for sure.
Okay. Yeah, I agree. I would really love to see an in-person performance. I think our next steps are to kind of maybe reiterate some of the vignettes. We have like higher quality filming equipment, so we would like to refilm some of these vignettes that were done previously, kind of fast. And we would like to find ways to present this work. I have a sense that it's a very experimental work, so I think it will need time and even time for us to process it and see where we can publish it. I know that we were thinking of also writing a paper about it. Yeah, so presenting it at places, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, it's wonderful to have some of your questions today because it's already starting to help us formulate some of these things that, we kind of know, we sense, but we haven't put in words yet. And so starting to reflect back and see also, what is coming out of that project as part of our next steps for sure.
Great. Well, thank you all so much. And thank you to everyone in the audience for taking time to be with us here this morning. And I look forward to the day that we'll be able to see the project IRL.
Thank you so much, everyone for coming.
Yeah, thanks for coming, and thanks to the Jake and to Emily for hosting us.
Yes.
Check out the website and let us know what you think.
And the College of Arts and Sciences for providing us with this Mellon Foundation Fellowship to develop the work.